Hello and welcome to the final regular season game recap for the Hamilton Ticats. We're going to be talking largely more about the full season than just this game, because this game did not have a lot of relevance. Neither team was really playing for anything, and you could largely see that by the depth chart. Just a cursory glance at the Hamilton depth chart, which had guys like Bobby Richardson in starting positions, Matt Jackson-Bennett, Lucas Waha, Cam Newton, Courtney Stephen, who's been a starter, of course, in the past, and it seems a bit harsh to say that about him, but with Mike Daly being healthy, it was, a move that definitely was designed to give some backup some playing time. And, of course, looking at the offense, which was minus Jeremiah Masoli, minus Alex Green, minus Luke Tasker, minus Kelvin Palmer, minus Riker Matthews, although Riker Matthews was injured, and I do believe Alex Green is also a little bit banged up as well. No Ted Laurent, no Justin Capicotti, no Delvin Breaux. It was definitely a case of playing some guys to get some time and get a good look at them, which made the game very interesting in that sense. But the result of the game, which if you were not paying attention, was a Hamilton Tiger Cats loss 30-28 on a last-second field goal by Liam Harala, which did not connect, made that less important realistically speaking, because it was really looking at, by the way, it's Curtis Newton, not Cam Newton. It definitely made it a less important game in terms of judging the performance of the team heading into the playoffs. How ready are they? Mike Filer and Brandon Revenberg dressed but did not play. That's another example, again, of the continuation. So only one starting O-lineman and Darius Shirako played the game. This kind of thing. But let's talk about the performances briefly and kind of shout out some people who did give us a pretty solid outing and maybe look forward to the future. Let's start with Dane Evans, the quarterback. Not that he had the most solid outing, not the most consistent, not the most uplifting, but he was pretty serviceable, going 22 of 37 for 315 yards with 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I don't think he necessarily suits the gameplay style that this team has developed around Jeremiah Masoli. I think you particularly see that on the out passes, the sort of sideline to sideline stuff where Jeremiah Masoli does it very well by absolutely bulleting the ball in there, and you saw with Dane Evans, it didn't really have that. Defenses had chances to react to it. Really, something that if Dane Evans were forced to play, I would like to see a lot less of. And really, the last play of the game kind of summed that up pretty hard, because he drops back, he throws one of those kind of, again, crossing passes to the flat, and Felix Faubert-Lucier hauls it in and gets tackled immediately for a loss that forces a longer field goal. And that was kind of how those went the whole game. Also, just a bad play selection, if I may be allowed to go about it. You were really just setting up for a game-winning field goal. You could hand the ball off, pick up a couple of yards. I think they were looking at a 43-yarder at the time. Instead, you throw it on one of those, again, a part of the game plan that I don't think is instituted very well by Dane Evans, and it's to the wrong guy. No disrespect to Felix Faubert-Lucier, who I'm actually a fairly big fan of. I mean, a guy who hustles his ass off on special teams, does a lot of things, and has actually come up relatively big when asked to do so. But he's not a guy who's going to make a lot of people miss. It's not a Brandon Banks or a Terrell Sigfield type player, which those game plans are kind of built around, or a Chris Williams or Jalen Saunders. It's kind of a bigger possession-related receiver. So I think that was a pretty poor play selection, but I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Again, it was a relatively meaningless game. On the ground, John White had a pretty solid day with 9 carries for 88 yards. I thought Sean Thomas Erlington was absolutely lights out throughout the entirety of the game. 6 carries for 41 yards. He also caught 4 passes for 54. Almost all of those were on the last drive of the game. I'm coining him the Canadian pinball off of just a move he had when he was running up the sidelines and bounced off multiple defenders and then managed to turn and get out of bounds with a play. It was a fantastic play and really highlighted what I think this guy can bring to the team. And I want to see more of him, because he's been inconsistently used really the entire season. If you look at his production, it's been pretty damn good when he's been used. I'm just going to pull up his numbers here via CFL.ca and kind of read them down. And keep in mind, this is a guy who does not start, does not do anything in that regard. He's been targeted 8 times this season. He's caught 7 of them for 93 yards. He's done a good job in that regard. I would like to see him used more in the pass game. And then when it comes to the rushing game, he's also done pretty damn solid there as well. He's been our 4th leading rusher behind Alex Green, John White, and Jeremiah Masoli. Surprisingly ahead of Mercer Timmis, who I think has been more prominently. And you can see this also in the fact that Sean Thomas Arlington has 34 carries to Timmis' 44. He's averaging 6.4 yards per carry, 218 yards, had his first touchdown of the season and possibly of his career in this game, a 1-yard touchdown run. I think, a guy who we need to look more in the future and do some things with. I thought he had a spectacular game through the air. Markway McDaniel was targeted 6 times. He hauled in 3 of those for 25 yards. Did okay. Mike Jones, I thought, had a pretty good game. He was targeted 7 times, hauled in 5 of them for 114 yards and 1 of the touchdowns. I thought that another guy, the other star kind of in the passing game was Braylon Addison, who was targeted 12 times, only held in 7 of them for 103 yards. Did have a drop, did kind of set up one of Dane Evanson's interceptions, but a guy who I think definitely jumped ahead of a couple of guys like Rashad Lawrence and Justin Burren. I want to see him in the starting lineup for the playoff game because, of course, this receiving core is very, very beat up. We're going to be without Jalen Saunders. We're going to be without Brandon Banks, I believe is the case. We are going to be without Chris Williams. We are going to be without Terrence Tolliver, I do believe. I may be wrong on Tolliver. He may be ready to play, but I know the other 3 are not playing. And that puts you at Luke Tasker, Markway McDaniel, Mike Jones, and Terrell Sigfield as your starters. I would like to see Braylon Addison be the last guy in that group. Shamar Chambers is also going to be missing, but we've been missing him all season pretty much. Very beat up receiving core. I thought Addison played really well here today, yesterday, and delivered a pretty good game. I'd like to see him get a chance. On the defensive end of the ball, I was really impressed with Jackson Bennett, who I thought did a fantastic job. I thought Bobby Richardson also created a lot of havoc along the line. We had 4 sacks despite playing a lot of backups, although again, those were coming on odd man blitzes, which Glanville's not been super, super happy to do. Nikita Whitlock was the only actual lineman to get a sack. Nikita Whitlock, I think, also needs to play a much larger role in this defense. I think every time he's out there, he creates a lot of pressure up the middle. And it probably makes up for the fact that I've been saying it kind of all season, that whether it's Julian Hauscher and Capicotti and Tracy, or any other kind of combination, we don't have the greatest pressure off the ends. And to get that pressure up the middle via Ted Laurent and Nikita Whitlock, I think is going to be huge for our success going forward. I think a big concern coming into the next game, though, against the BC Lions, is that we may be without Riker Matthews, who is a little bit injured, a little bit banged up. He has an arm injury and hopefully will play in the playoff game versus BC. So let's talk about that playoff game. Let's talk about where this can go. I mean, obviously, when you talked about BC, we went 1-1 against them in the regular season. We had a controversial loss to them in BC, not because of refereeing or anything, but because of, and we're going to talk about some controversial refereeing in a little bit, but we're, some bad coaching to a degree and didn't really deliver in that regard. So hopefully it's a very winnable game, and hopefully we can come up big. We need Jeremiah Masoli to play solid, and we need Jeremiah Masoli to recognize additional receivers, and this has been my main knock on Masoli kind of all season. I mean, he's gotten better at learning to throw the ball away. He's got some other problems. He doesn't really adjust his throwing style to suit weather necessarily. We saw that as a problem against Ottawa in the wet. He really struggled to give catchable balls because he kept trying to bullet it to guys who were having to jump up or was behind them or a number of things. Not accurate passes, also very bulleted. It didn't work with the kind of weather that we had, so he needs to adjust when that comes to calling, but that's a bit of a rarity thing. But the thing that, to me, I think is the problem is Jeremiah Masoli is lacking in chemistry, trust, or he just gets locked in on certain receivers. Like, he really wants to go to Luke Tasker just about every play. And it wasn't so bad when you had Tasker and Banks and Jalen Saunders, who he felt very comfortable with. And I think he's developing some comfort with Mike Jones. But you kind of see it as that, Justin Burren, who's been inserted in the starting lineup, is supposedly doing great things in practice and stuff, is not really a part of the game plan for the Hamilton Tiger Cats. He was targeted 3 times here against Montreal, and on the season, And keep in mind, this is the entire season. Granted, he's only played a couple of games, but he's been a starter for a couple of games now. And if we look at his numbers, he's been pretty it's not even really he's just been ineffectual, but he's only been targeted, actually he's been targeted 20 times now that I look at it. Yeah, I'm actually a lot kind of out on Justin Byrne. 8 catches on 20 attempts to him is kind of limited when you look at kind of some of the other numbers here, because I think he's the only person who's incomplete to more often than not. Could be mistaken about this. Oh no, Markway McDaniel only has 8 catches out of 19 thrown at him. So he's also got a similarly kind of bad numbers in that regard. But that's about it. And Markway's in there for veteran stability, and hopefully he can produce. But yeah, I would definitely be sub out Byrne for Braylon Addison, who, 8 catches on 13 targets, 113 yards, as opposed to Burns' 20 targets, 8 catches, 85 yards. That would be definitely a big thing. And yeah, like I said, the receiving core very beat up. You've got Luke Tasker, who was over 1,000 yards along with Brandon Banks this season, and you got Mike Jones, who I thought had a bit of a breakout year, 48 catches for 841 yards, 3 touchdowns, was targeted a little 80 times. Jalen Saunders is out, Terrence Tulloff is out. Your next highest receiver is Rashad Lawrence on 131 yards. And I've been very unimpressed with Lawrence. He kind of fits into that Justin Byrne mold of guys who I thought were given reasonable ample opportunity and didn't really prove themselves. But I think a part of that is the quarterback, like I said, because I think Masoli doesn't really develop these trust and chemistry with these guys very well. It's something that, for example, Bo Levi-Mitchell in Calgary does a great job in, and it's why Calgary can have a beat-up receiving core or a constantly changing receiver core with guys going to the NFL and sometimes coming back in the case of Eric Rodgers. But, losing those kind of number one targets repetitively, be it for injury or by leaving the team, and then just developing new ones because he can find that chemistry, that kinship with his receivers very quickly, and Masoli definitely does not do that. And that's why I think the injuries have been harder to absorb for the Hamilton Tiger Cats than most teams, and the comparisons are hard to. That being said, it's not something we can excuse, because it's something Masoli's got to get better at doing if he's going to be a top-level quarterback and a kind of franchise player, which I think he has the ability to do. I think if you look at the league right now, you could argue Jeremiah Masoli is the third best quarterback in the entire CFL. I think he's behind Billy Mitchell and Mike Riley for sure, but I think that's about it. Zach Collaros has had some serious injury problems. There's not really anything in Montreal or Toronto. Trevor Harris has been inconsistent, although I guess you could put him in there. And Matt Nichols I just don't rate tremendously highly. And Jonathan Jennings is the absolute Jekyll and Hyde of the league. And then there's Travis Lulay, who's a bit of an aging out guy who probably I'd rank ahead of Masoli, but not a long-term project, obviously, as he's been a starter, he's been a backup. He started as a backup, became a starter, back to a backup, now kind of a starter again. So, not really the guy to put into the equation of long-term talk. Sorry, I had to take a beverage there. What do we have for the Lions? Well, it's going to have to come down to June Jones coaching this team very well and making a lot of good decisions, which he has not necessarily done. Jeremiah Masoli is going to have a very good game, and of course the pressure that came previously with Sean Lemon and Devon Coleman particularly is going to have to be protected against. That's where I really hope Riker Matthews plays, because as much as Asami, I'm going to butcher his name, I'm warning you right now. Asami Fashion played pretty well at right tackle this game. I don't really want him starting, and I've been long, of course, a critic of Avery Jordan, who would be the other option in that regard to start at that position, and that's going to be a problem, I think, in general, if Riker Matthews cannot go. I think the defense can absolutely shut down BC, because BC's offense is anemic at times, inconsistent. I think our defense is pretty strong and pretty healthy right now. I think I'm not sure if Justin Capicati is hurt. I noticed he left the game against Ottawa. Didn't play here today. Wasn't on the roster, but I'm not entirely sure if that's a major injury or just kind of a banged up, give him a rest deal. But aside from him, I think the team is largely healthy right now. You are going to have Nikita Whitlock, Ted Laurent, Jason Neal, you are going to have Julian Hauscher available. You're going to have Larry Dean, Simone Lawrence, and Don Unamba ready. You're going to have Rashard Leonard. You're going to have Jamal Roll. You're going to have Josh Johnson. You're going to have Mike Daly healthy. Cariel Brooks is healthy. I think there's a question about Delvin Breaux being healthy and being ready. Hopefully he is. But, of course, the interesting thing is if Capicotti is hurt, you have to juggle the ratio a little bit and do some things in that regard. Because, of course, Capicotti is a Canadian starter. And if he does not play, one would assume the defensive end combination would be some combination of Hauscher, Tracy, and Richardson, and not Connor McGough, who would be the Canadian replacement, but I don't think is really ready for that kind of role. Where do you fit the other Canadian in? And I kind of wonder if that's maybe Jackson Bennett, who played really well here today, replacing Don Unamba at the strong side linebacker. You could maybe move Unamba into the secondary. I don't really know where else a Canadian would fit into the lineup defensively. Your other option would be to go with a starting Canadian running back, go with the Mercer Timmis, Sean Thomas Erlington double-headed beast, or to take the spot that I advocated for Braylon Addison in the receiving corps and give it to a Canadian, be that Sean Thomas Erlington, which I would not necessarily be opposed to, or be that Felix Faubert-Lucier, and go with a double national receiving corps. Everyone's going to also want to ask about Liam Haralahu, who I thought had been playing pretty well actually the last couple of games. He did miss a field goal here at the end of this one, but my faith in him is largely restored, that we have a reliable kicker, if not a great kicker, not a best kicker, not an all-star for sure, not a Justin Medlock type figure, but one who can probably get the job done. So I'm hoping the defense can shut down what BC wants to do offensively, and I'm hoping that Jeremiah Masoli can have a very consistent game and get everyone involved, spread the ball around, not ask Luke Tasker to be every second down conversion, not ask a team, really, because really, I mean, you got Sigfield as well, but this team needs to be more than a two-receiver team. It can't just be Tasker and Sigfield. It's got to be a little bit of Mark Wade McDaniel. It's got to be getting Mike Jones involved occasionally. It's got to be hopefully Braylon Addison, but maybe it's a Sean Thomas Erlington in that fifth receiver spot that has a lights out game and does some great things. This is a very winnable game, and the game against Ottawa is also very winnable. Chances to go to the Grey Cup here are pretty good. Calgary was not playing sharp at the end of the season, so I think any kind of idea that they're definitely going to be there and that they're definitely going to be just the team to beat is a bit weird because, again, Hamilton had a good season against Winnipeg, had a good season against also against Saskatchewan Roughriders, I think. I'm looking up our games against Saskatchewan because I honestly can't recall what they were, but let's see here. Riders, Hamilton. Looking. I know that we had a good season against Winnipeg. Hopefully. And we had a very good game early in the season against Calgary as well, so I like our chances kind of all around here. Hamilton versus Saskatchewan. Where are you? Man, we played Saskatchewan way back, so this may not be the fairest indicator because, of course, the Riders have gotten a fair bit better and played very well towards the end of the season. Okay, they beat us 31-20 and 18-13, so I guess that would be kind of the team to avoid in a way. Go Winnipeg. But yeah, I think the league is very open right now. And this could be a time for Hamilton to get hot and steal one. Kind of like Toronto did last season. Speaking of Toronto, they fired Marc Trestman as head coach. Based on what I'm reading into it was kind of a disagreement between Trestman and Pop as to how to proceed further. And I would have probably stuck with Trestman. I've never been the biggest believer in Jim Pop because a lot of the talent he's developed over the years came in an era with Don Matthews as head coach, which I think played a huge role because anyone who's been paying attention, I have massive respect for Don Matthews. It's one of the best CFL coaches of all time. And then, of course, kind of Montreal, maybe seeing what other teams were missing in terms of other people. Anthony Calvillo probably is the greatest example of that. A guy who another team gave up on, who was not a Montreal find, but one that they profit off of to a great degree. But yeah, it's hard to see. It's hard to see where Trestman going at 1 year removed from a Grey Cup win. It's very weird in that regard. And you know what? We got to talk Johnny Manziel for a second here. He played only one quarter in this game. Was not bad by any means during that quarter, though. Credit to him. He went 4 for 5 with a touchdown, 58 yards. Shout out to Eugene Lewis on their team, by the way, who they really need to get more involved in the offense because he had 2 catches for 105 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's a guy you got to get the ball into the hands of a lot more, if I may be blunt. But Manziel, he played well here, but I think overall in the season, I was kind of said it. I feel Antonio Pipkin has really got more upside. I think he's a bigger, stronger armed quarterback. I think that he's better at executing set plays, something that Manziel's not. People tend to like be big about, oh, Manziel's great at improvisation and making things out of broken plays, but realistically, if your goal is to break the play so that you can show off improvisational skills, and that's not what I'm saying it is, but like if that's your great strength, I have to wonder how valid a choice of starter you become at that point. But I like Pipkin. We'll see if they give Manziel another shot. We'll see if Manziel's interested in having another shot, to be honest. I'm not convinced that he is. I think that there's a lot of attitude problem there, and a lot of people want to go with the Doug Flutie comparison with him, and I've said it repetitively. Number one, I think we remember Flutie with slightly rose-tinted sunglasses, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, Doug Flutie got kind of over the whole thing of, he started off through a lot of interceptions early on, and then he recovered, and he became a great quarterback, which he did, and I'm not remotely disputing that. But what I would say is that when it comes down to it, Doug Flutie never really stopped throwing interceptions, if we're being 100% honest. Granted, like for example, his rookie season was not even his highest interception total in the league. He threw 19 that year. He threw 24 the following year. He threw 30 when he went to Calgary. And it calmed down after that. Even in the great season with Toronto in 1997, he threw 24 interceptions. It didn't really suddenly stop throwing interceptions. It's just that he made such great plays that it didn't matter that he threw like a relatively high pick number for a great quarterback. And in the case of Johnny Manziel, I don't really feel that there's a tremendous interest in evolving and increasing his abilities. What were his numbers at the end of the season? Johnny Manziel played 8 games, went 106 for 165, 1,290 yards, 5 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Actually not terrible numbers after the original problems early on. Efficiency was a bit low at 80.6, although higher than Zach Collaros's, notably, but much lower than the likes of Mike Riley, Jeremiah Masoli, Bo Levi Mitchell, Trevor Harris, Matt Nichols even, lower than Travis Lulay, lower than McLeod Bethel Thompson, and James Franklin, Jonathan Jennings. Not that this is a be-end or end-all statistical breakdown in that regard. This is one area. But, like we credit Jonathan, we are kind of, roasting Jonathan Jennings for throwing a lot of interceptions. He threw the same number in more games. So there's definitely that case to be made. I like Pipkin. Pipkin, for comparison purposes, Pipkin 6 games, slightly lower completion rating, but he also stretches the field a lot more. He went 78 of 131 for 1,120 yards through 8 interceptions, but I believe can be a very good quarterback. And I don't think there's a lot of ego to deal with there. With Manziel, I still feel he feels this is a shortcut back to the NFL. And if it didn't dominate early, I don't really know how long he sticks around or how engaged he is to improve. But that's not about the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who need to go out there and execute against BC. It's an absolutely winnable game. In fact, this is an absolutely winnable Grey Cup. So go out there, execute on a high level, deliver, and June Jones needs to make the appropriate calls and not kind of shove his foot in his mouth with some of the play calls that he has made, because there are a couple of games that one really has to wonder if some better calls have been made on the offensive side of the ball, if victory would have been ours and we wouldn't be limping into the playoffs at an 8-10 record. So I'll talk to you after the playoff game, and I hope you enjoy that. It's a blackout game, and I'll be there hopefully with my black tie-dye shirt, which my sister is working on.